today is called Meet the Pioneers. We're going to look at some of those companies and organizations that are stepping outside the box and look at a little bit different perspective on how they can test technologies and really be successful for our kiddos in the classroom. So I'm turning it back over to our wonderful moderator, Goldie. So Goldie, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. For those of you who weren't here this morning, I'm Goldie Blumenstyk. I'm a senior writer at the Chronicle of Higher Education. When I started at the Chronicle of Higher Education 27 years ago, we published something that looked like this. Well, it actually never looked nearly as good as this, but it looked like this back then. And today, of course, we're very digital, and we still publish a very formidable print product. So, Chronicle.com is how you find us on the web. Very excited to be at this panel today. I appreciate it. I just want to also just take the temperature of the room. We did this earlier. How many of you are in K-12? Oh, a lot more K-12. Higher ed? Still higher ed runs the show. Anybody from the ed tech world, sort of? And as I asked before, just plain old tech stumbled in somehow by mistake? Okay, cool. Great. So this is a session that's called Meet the Pioneers. And to crib from Peter Smith on our left here, there's a lot of ways to be a pioneer in this space, and we have a nice variety on this stage. Luckily enough, though, there are some things that hold everyone in common, and one of that is they're all kind of working with technologies or with ideas that empower individualization and personalization and to a great degree self-direction in education, both either for the student or for the professor. And so I think that's a nice theme that we have running through this thing. I'm kind of excited about this topic because I spent some time looking at it when I wrote the book, American Higher Education in Crisis, which someone earlier told me it should be called like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Education Crisis right now, because it's sort of a put it in your pocket kind of book. I was very excited by a lot of these ideas because I thought they showed a great deal of promise and innovation, but at the same time, some peril at the same time of that. There's just the opportunity in the individualization is great because there's a great opportunity to kind of mold your own career, take a little from column A, a little from column B, and as Michael Moe, the head of GSV Advisors, has put it, it becomes what you know, not where you went. Not where you went to, not where'd you go to college, but what do you know. But at the same time, as other people have noted, there's some dangers in this uncollege movement that I think we have to identify. It has the potential to exacerbate inequality, in effect, particularly for students who come from homes where they haven't been given the skills to kind of navigate this complicated environment. If you think about what it takes right now for students to just navigate through the traditional routes through college, we have pretty high dropout rates from community colleges. We have unremarkable graduation rates from four-year colleges, and that's just going through the traditional way. So if you think about the world of infinite options, as some people spoke to me when I wrote this book, there's a lot more opportunity for people to kind of go off the rails on that side. So I think what we're talking about here today is a lot of it's very promising, but also let's also take it with a bit of caution. We're going to start, we have a big panel and a lot to cover in a short period of time. We're going to start kind of where we started this morning, hearing a little bit about a company that has gone through pretty much a radical transformation, I would say. Kurt Strand from McGraw-Hill is going to tell us a little bit about McGraw-Hill, and it's, if you want to think of it as a publisher of books, well, that's like 4 years ago. That's not what they are right now. Kurt, if you could talk to us a little bit about some of the changes that McGraw-Hill has been made, and I'm going to steal one of your notes just because I thought it was so striking. I think you said 5 years ago, 80% of the revenues came from print products, and today that's down to 30%. To me, that's a pretty radical transformation. So why don't you kick us off here, and then I'll interrupt you as appropriate.
Thanks, glad to be here. I have a favor. My wife sent me a picture of the temperature in Chicago. It was 8 below this morning, 30 below wind chill. So I'm going to take your picture so I can prove to her that I'm working. So hang on, can everybody wave, please? All right, thank you very much. David Levin was here this morning. We had our sales meeting in Phoenix, and I flew in this morning. Didn't hear him, but I saw a lot of tweets about what he said. And at our meeting, he described us as renewing and refreshing a 125-year-old company. The way we describe ourselves is a learning technology company. Textbooks don't interest us that much, to be honest. Textbooks don't really improve outcomes that much. The content is critical, and really great content is very, very important. But for us, the content isn't what is driving outcomes, driving better results for students and for institutions. And so we have evolved our organization over the last few years, especially. Now, I'm maybe the only guy in higher education that's never left a company and switched around. If you know anything about higher ed, people seem to go from one of the few companies back and forth and forth. 33 years for me at McGraw-Hill, I've done pretty much every single job. And the thing that I have noticed is that this industry, higher education, has changed more in the last 3 years than it has in the first 30 years I spent in the business. I don't know how many of you go way back in higher ed, but some of the biggest things we had to do was figure out how to give acetates to instructors or things like that. Now, the world has totally changed. When I started, I'd talk to a professor about a book for a course. Currently, we're talking to them about results, we're talking to them about retention, we're talking to them about placement, talking to them about platforms. Our strategy as a higher ed organization is personalized, adaptive, analytics, mobile. We build content. And so the changes that we have done in the past few years, we now have 500 engineers in our organization. 5 years ago, we may have had 5. We have, under my team, I have a chief product officer. I have about 500 people in my group. Out of that group now, I say everybody has a digital position, but we actually have people with software backgrounds in every product team, directors of digital content. And so in the old days where you had an editor, a developer, maybe a marketing manager, now they're surrounded by people with digital skills, digital talent, a sense for what's going on, many of them with higher ed teaching experience. Because it seems to me that the content we build can be useful for students, but great teachers know that key teaching point that allows the student to really master that content. So we've shifted that as an organization. For the first year ever for McGraw-Hill, digital revenue is higher across the board, not just in higher education, across the board, than print revenue. And so this transformation for us is really tremendous and is really happening. The investment that we're making in digital is about $150 million this year. Compare that to, in the past, very, very, very small. And we looked at digital, along with numerous other customers, institutions, et cetera, as kind of a supplement. The textbook is king, and we have all this other stuff that goes with it. We changed our content production group. Production was the old-fashioned name. They're all called Content Design and Delivery. We build content. 5 years ago, we made a book, and we would convert it so it could be resident on an iPad or whatever the device was. We now build content. We tag it, we store it. We're building compound learning objects, very small bits that are modular, that allow instructors to build a course, institutions to use this, and to enable them. I heard Curator in the last session. They enable them to do that type of thing as our customers and our partners. The other changes that I've seen at McGraw-Hill is, for the first 30 years, I think we may have bought one company. Last 3 years, we've got 3 digital companies. Very shifting how we're doing this. We're partnering with people in a way that we haven't done. We have all sorts of different kind of models, pay for performance. There's an institution that uses our content, and they come to us and they'll say, if the students don't get a B or an A, they don't really pay. If students get a B or an A, they're paying actually a higher percentage of that because they want their students to get through the content and experience, so they're prepared.
Wait, can you say that again?
Pay for performance.
But for the student?
So for the students would come to this institution and they take a class. And the class is not time bound. There's a certain time they have to get through. But you can finish the class in 2 weeks, 2 months, 6 months. If you come out of that with a C, and see, they don't want anybody to come out with a C. So they allow their students to go through that class longer and longer, and then they'll come out with a B or an A. And the key for this is that even if the student got a C, and then they take the next course, they're not prepared for that next course. It's all about being prepared. So what we see as far as placement, and I know we're going to talk about Alex in a little bit, I have a philosophy that nobody's bad at math. People say, I hate math, I'm bad at math. You're just in the wrong course. If you're in the right course, if you are a student that is giving a problem that you have a very high likelihood of answering correctly, and our software can diagnose this, then you will get that successfully, and you'll move on and move on and move on. And we have an example at University of Illinois where they were using this Alex product, and they had 200% enrollment increase in their upper level courses. So what does that do for math people at University of Illinois? They're thrilled because they get to teach the fun stuff. They don't have to teach calculus. They can teach all the upper level really cool things that they went to college and they love doing. Okay. So our organization has shifted from textbook to outcomes, and having digital. And the key thing for me about digital, it's not about the technology, it's about learning. If the technology doesn't help learning, you don't really need the technology.
And can you give us a little context for this? You talked a little bit about at Austin Community College, you're using one of these new technology-enhanced learning environments. I don't know what to call it anymore. It's not a book. It's not a course. It's not a thing. Can you tell us a little bit about how this works for this math program that Austin Community College runs?
Sure. So at Austin Community College, our administration bought a mall, a shopping mall that died, and they put the nation's largest computer lab, and there's a photo on there, I think if you go to the next slide. But anyway, it was a J.C. Penney's, and this computer lab has 604 stations in it, and it quite literally is the size of a football field. So there's an exterior view of the mall, and then you really can't take a picture of the whole thing. But if you imagine a football field, and that really truly is the size of it, the math department doesn't use the entire lab. Other courses use the lab for various reasons, but we have classes in there where students are working on ALEX. And
so ALEX is a math program? ALEX
is a math program, and what we did is we typically have 3 semesters of developmental mathematics, and the success rates are abysmal, and it's very depressing for students and faculty, and yet these are skills that students absolutely must have in order to be prepared for college level mathematics. So we can't just ditch them. We've got to somehow or another find a way for students to be successful here. So students would come into the lab at a particular time of day with a particular instructor, and they would work on ALEX. And what we did is we put all 3 semesters of the content into ALEX organizes the material in a pie, like a circle graph, and they just work their way through it at whatever pace they can. And the beautiful thing about it is that some students got through it very quickly, and then they may have even started in August and finished in October, and then off they go. They don't have to stay the rest of the semester. Or what ended up happening is we made a college algebra pie, and then they could get a little preview of the next course. And that was great. We were thrilled to have the students who could go faster, and that's what the administration wants.
And the reason, step back for a second, one of the reasons is it's harder to get funding for developmental math in Texas now?
Well, in Texas, and I think a lot of states, the states don't want to have developmental mathematics classes. It's kind of embarrassing, it's not very successful, and it's expensive. And so there's a push from above to have students get through developmental faster. But all the teachers, like myself, know that you can't just make the students go faster. And really, by using ALEX, the ones that are slower, they might spend an entire semester doing what we would consider half of a semester's worth of work, but they're doing it. And they're chugging along like the little engine that could, and they're going to get through those courses quicker by going at their own pace, rather than being pushed and pushed and pushed, and then they hit the wall and then they drop out. So we're absolutely thrilled with it, and there's one more slide in the next screen where you can see, if you can see, I think one of the key components, and I heard earlier today, some people were talking about a blended model, the faculty. We have some incredible faculty members that are really gifted teachers, and they can relate to the students, and they can see in the student's face that little furrowed eyebrow just that takes 2 seconds, and the teacher knows, okay, I need to spend some more time with this, and they're so in touch with their students, and I think that's a key component, is having those human interactions, and the students are sitting next to each other, they're supporting each other, and the faculty are supporting the students. We're absolutely thrilled. It's going great. We've only done it for 1 semester, but so far so good.
And did you have any results that compared, old model versus new?
Well, we're in the process of crunching that data, and what we do know for sure is that the withdrawal rate is dramatically lower. In a typical developmental lecture classroom course, the withdrawal rate might be in the low to mid 20% range. And then of the students who stay, they're not all going to pass either. But in this course, the early numbers are showing it was more closer to about 7 or 8% of the students who withdrew. And I think that a big reason for that is they never really felt like they were failing. They always felt that they were making progress in some sense. Now, of course, at the community college, our students have children, jobs, financial problems, sometimes legal problems. There's all sorts of issues that our students face. So we're not going to expect nobody to drop out. But we're very excited to see that the percentage of withdrawals went significantly down. And then we'll see how they do in the next course. When they do get into college credit math, I'm very curious to see the numbers of how are they doing in the college credit courses.
And of course, there's a lot of people in this room know a lot of these students who leave those classes never actually come back. And that's a big place where we lose a lot of students in higher education. So, great. So, Gregor, going to shift gears a little bit. Versal helps professors individualize their courses a little bit more. And I'd like to understand a little bit about, we've talked a little bit before, we heard a little bit more about instructional designers and how, professors have to work in teams with all these people, and that seems to always be the places where the innovation breaks down. So how are you trying to sort of break that logjam?
That's actually a really interesting point. There's really three foundations on which we built Versal. The first foundation was that we saw an increasing disconnect between teachers, both on high school level but also in higher ed, and the way the students communicate. The students are in front of iPhones, they're in front of iPads and stuff like that. So they live in this digital world, while the teacher has no way to communicate with them in terms of teaching materials and so on. The second aspect of that is that, and we started the company at the height of the big MOOC movement. So the idea from somewhat Silicon Valley was, hey, listen, we're going to have this 2 or 3 companies, they're going to educate everybody, it's all going to be for free, and that's the end of it. And we didn't believe that that's what really would happen. What we thought has to happen is that teachers have to have access to the, and professors to the ability to actually create their own materials, mix them up with basically published materials, and create a blend of that. So you're teaching, for example, a course on, I don't know, diversity in the US or segregation in the US. And you want to bring in a local flavor in addition to what happens in the South, and where the local red lines and all of that stuff. And so the ability to actually do that in a course is critical in order to actually have a much, much better learning outcome. The third part was that the online learning industry, at least as far as the MOOCs are concerned, are being done by very, very smart people in Stanford and Harvard and MIT who have this absolute perfect recall. They can sit through an hour-and-a-half lecture, and at the end of it, they know have perfect notes and know actually everything that was said in that. I'm not one of those persons, and I would think 99% of the students are not these persons. They learn a lot better when things are interactive, when they can play with it, and so on. And that's a very expensive proposition to do in design of courses, because then you are at the point where you hire programmers. And so the idea here is that actually any teacher, any professor can actually create their own courses, can create this interactive experience. So you spend an enormous amount of energy and engineering efforts in the creation part, down to the point that, for example, one of the things that caught us by surprise, which we didn't know, is that a lot of teachers were starting to use it to actually use the product for student-led learning. So instead of building a course out, they built a skeleton of a course, and they said, you guys, group A does this part, group B does this part, and so on. And the students actually would build their own courses, and at the end of the semester, of the end of the project, they would put it up in the school website so the parents actually could see what they have been doing. And it has a completely different level of retention if you think about how somebody else learns.
That's at a K-12 level.
That's mainly in a really in a high school, middle high school level.
Because I guess I'm sitting here wondering, McGraw-Hill is a giant company, it's invested in 500 engineers and no shortage of learning scientists, I'm sure. To some degree, I think you would probably put a lot of research into what is good pedagogy. Who says that this professor actually knows the best pedagogy to put into their class? I mean, being able to grab a gizmo and put it into the course, does that necessarily mean it's a great course?
Well, a lot of it is making things locally relevant and making things culturally relevant. I mean, we kind of has the idea of that this, and to some extent, it's it's critical. I mean, she was talking about a teacher who has this little eyebrow and has this idea of, hey, listen, there's something going on in my classroom and I have to address it. That's exactly the kind of teacher that then can actually address it even in an online course. He can flip their own classroom, but in a relevant content of what they have done in the classroom. So they can create homework assignments. A lot of these projects are very small projects. There might be just one lesson or two lessons that they just put out there to cover a specific area. It's not to cover all of the, I don't know, cell biology or things like that. It's cover smaller aspects of that. And some professors, some teachers make semester-long courses and just basically say, take that course, you don't ever have to show up in the classroom if you know that material. I mean, it goes all ways. And we actually are seeing a lot of commercial publishers using that because they like the ability to have a flexible content. So they provide the core content and then
a placeholder for insert localization
insert localization here, or change this here, or restructure that there based on local requirements, based on the history of the students and so on. And it can even go to that point that it actually can make individualized courses for single students.
Heather. So, there's a clicker. I think we're supposed to do something.
There should be a clicker up there.
Hey, how about that? Is this the clicker?
Yeah.
Hey, how about that magic? Thank you. So Pathbrite has takes the individualization a little bit further. You're not teaching, but you're helping students display what they've been learning. Tell us a little bit about how that model works. And I think you said you sell to colleges. That's your market, even though this is a student product that colleges are your clients. Help us understand the context for why a college. The context in 2014 of why a college would want to buy that product.
Sure. What Pathbrite is a modern day e-portfolio. So we've built upon a known, proven technology that has been proven in longitudinal studies to improve program completion rates, critical thinking skills, and more recently, job placement rates. And we've made it with modern technology. We have an architecture whereby individuals can actually use their portfolios for life and continue to build upon a body of knowledge, curate, remix different portfolios to showcase what they've achieved and learned. And then simultaneously, what we realize is our mission is absolutely to optimize student success. And we can't do that without working with the institutions in which they attend. And so, so what we've built is an enterprise-ready platform whereby students who submit completed work, or let's say they're actually assigned to submit 5 drafts of an essay, they submit those drafts into the instructor. The instructor can annotate, grade, and the students have all the evidence of all the body of work that they've been building on, all the drafts, et cetera. But the institutions get to hold on to everything submitted to them. And they get to actually track the progress and growth of each learner. And they get to know more about their learning community. So we believe that, there needs to be that symbiotic relationship. But our architecture is such that each individual who uses those, their portfolio accounts for life can engage in different learning communities, whether they be in elementary, high school, college, or 5 different companies that they work in. So it's really a lifelong learning tool.
But your main focus is the portfolio during college.
That's correct. Our business model is that universities, higher ed institutions, as you articulated at the very beginning, they're really struggling. Privates and public four-year institutions have about a 52% completion rates of students. And so they're struggling with all their might to help students be more successful, to graduate and be career ready. And so, so we know that this technology can help them on that mission. And so what the universities are buying on behalf of their students is a technology and infiltrated or infused with their content and instruction to help those students learn how to be successful, to learn how to showcase their achievements, et cetera.
And then eventually these students can take this portfolio and take it later in life to sort of showcase some of their lifelong learning that they're doing, some of these badges, ideas, some of the
And actually, it's even different than that in that, or adding to that idea, is that, a transcript becomes irrelevant relatively quickly. I'm sorry to say, once you graduate and once you're couple decades into your work life, but we're all doing just-in-time learning and creation continuously. That's just the way it happens now. And so having a living credential, if you will, that can have official signed electronic transcripts coupled with strategic plans you've written, coupled with graded dissertations you've written, and all that work, and you can continue to add to it as you learn more and achieve more. So the idea is to have a living credential where I can continue to showcase on a daily basis, if I so desire, what I'm learning and doing.
I think this is the kind of the area that some of our earlier panelists were also talking about. It sounds really cool. At the same time, I also know it kind of opens up a very confusing environment. When you think about how people get jobs, you have to sort of pass your resume through these sort of resume scanners and all this other magic out there. Sometimes there's not necessarily a lot of individualized reflection on job applicants' resumes. So yeah. I know there's some contrast to some of that.
That's absolutely right. And actually the reason that we did this is because there's such difficulty on behalf of either an admissions officer or an employer in trying to differentiate today's candidates by looking at a one-dimensional resume or standardized test or something, or a GPA. And you really don't get a sense of what are Heather's passions and real competencies compared to somebody else's. So it's not really doing justice to the individual learner who has very unique capabilities, nor is it being an efficient process or system for those would-be employers who are trying to find the right fit. And you're right, workflow has to change a little bit on behalf of hiring employers and others who use the system. But we know from employers in all aspects of industry that they're looking for better insights into students. And so one of the capabilities that, so an individual student, for example, can have portfolios that she's created in courses, but also with career services support, and also pet projects or community projects she's involved in. And she can take content from her library and remix different portfolios to showcase them in different areas. Even with employers, I may apply for a job in product marketing one place, Marcom in another, and PR in another, and I may have 75% of the same content, but I want to recurate it to showcase different and highlight different kinds of capabilities for different opportunities. And so, we do think that that the individual as well as the institution having those capabilities is important, but we think also it's really important to teach in today's workforce and moving forward to give those students, those learners, the skill to manage their digital identity, to be able to take verified evidence of badges, transcripts, etc., and to curate what's relevant, they believe, and puts their best reputation and capabilities forward.
So, Peter, does any of this sound familiar over there at Kaplan?
I'm sitting here trying to figure out how I can latch on to some of these resources. First of all, thank you, Carrie, for such a great day.
I wanted to do that too, Peter. I just want to say thank you. You've done a great job, Carrie.
One of the things that I note, and then I'll do my 5 minutes, is that when I started what is now the Community College of Vermont, it was a binary deal. You either were for it or against it or totally confused, and you had people out there trying to stop it. The conversation in this room and what you achieve consistently, and there are a few other places but not many, is there's a lot of space. We don't know exactly what's going to work and what's not going to work. We hope, and it will be some amalgam of all the things we're talking about and hearing about. And I really appreciate the change in our ability to think about divergent things without having it become a binary deal. So we started in a very different place. Starting about 2.5 years ago, I was asked to find a bunch of people and figure out what the college of the future might look like, or a college of the future, because as somebody said earlier, there's not going to be one college of the future, it's going to be a whole bunch. And we came up with what is now called Open College at Kaplan University, and I think there's a slide in there someplace. It's a very complicated slide. That's it. Yep. That's how technological I am.
And the card's on your chair with the URL.
And yeah, and the card's on the chair. And what we started with was, if you want to be adaptive and personalized, then you've got to start with the learner. And that includes the learners' informal learning and their ongoing informal learning. That includes the formal learning they do that we don't pay any attention to in most colleges because we put it on the transcript, but we don't count it towards graduation, which is cheesy in my humble estimation. And so we started and we came up with OC at KU. What it is, well, we're still finding out. It's live, but we haven't launched yet. I think another week we'll actually have a landing page where someone can enroll. We've had a few brave souls enroll. Like one woman called me and said, how the hell do I enroll in your college? I'm pretty interested in it. So
scale is an issue at this point.
Scale at this point won't be hopefully in about 5 days. But and the idea is that it revolves around assessment. So you can come and take, we have an agreement with the Open Education Consortium and all of their database. You can come and look through that. We have a free assessment service. We have a free career service called Career Journey, which is tied, it's the second or third largest API that LinkedIn ever did, and it's tied directly to the LinkedIn database. We have financial literacy courses. We have health-related courses. The first thing we came to was, most adults, we don't want to use Title IV, and we don't. Most adults need to make sense out of their lives. They have to figure out where they are, how they got there, where they want to go, and how to get there. And that may or may not involve degrees or certificates, but if we can help people place themselves in a non-judgmental way in terms of the question that is most important to them at this point in their lives, and help them think that through, then we're in a conversation with them and something else will happen. So we have all these free courses. We've created some. We're using other open and MOOC-style courses. And people can come talk to an advisor and go play in the sand for as long as they want. If they want to get an individual course or the equivalent of an individual course or an experiential learning portfolio assessed, then they're going to pay us some money. But it's when they want to convert what is already there to something of value to them, then they pay us $100 for a course equivalent, and for a learning recognition portfolio, I think it's $1,250. But the average award is more than a year's worth of college credit. So it ends up being a good investment. And if they go to Kaplan University or other institutions that are participating in a consortium with us, they just go and the institution pays us a placement fee. So it's set up that way. And then if you want to enroll, you come in, we place you, we do all that learning recognition, and it becomes part of a monthly subscription, $195 a month. We write with you an individualized learning plan based on what you already know.
So if you enroll, though, you're enrolling for a degree?
Yes.
Not
at
just
this
for,
point, but it will be certificates, it will be. Right now we have a Bachelor of Professional Studies. But the notion is that we help you identify the gap between where you are and where you want to go, and then we make our courses available, all the courses in our database. We help you go off. You have a learning advisor, faculty advisor. You come back and get these individual courses assessed for $100. So you pay us again by the assessment. And at the end of the day, there is a capstone experience which costs more than that, but we postponed that cost because it is more significant and we didn't want to put it in the subscription fee because people won't know until they're about halfway through. They may decide they don't want a degree, they want to do something else. So we held that to the end. It's a personalized learning concierge service. I define adaptation as instead of making the student adapt to you, your books, and that's really what everybody here has been saying all day, your timetable, your courses, your campus, your patterns. Our job is to figure out what they need, where they want to go in their lives, how they got where they are, and then adapt to them and wrap our knowledge and our resources around them. And it starts out free. We have all sorts of other kinds of things. We have just made an agreement with the Open Education Consortium so that anybody using that consortium can, in fact, begin to build a portfolio with us, and if they want to come use our services, they can come use our services.
So in effect, it's a way to organize your formal and your informal learning and measure it against some established standards. Because you can't just decide yourself what you want, right?
And we can't, and you can't, and we aren't going to tell you exactly what you want. The last thing I'll say is Canadian researcher Alan Tuff recently died. He developed something known as the Adults Learning Projects in 1965. The average adult on all continents spends the average 700 hours a year learning something. Make it simple. Divide that by 50, even though there are 52 weeks. You get a pretty big number. If that's what adults are doing, why aren't we trying to help them figure out what that learning means to them before we ask them to go and learn something else? So, if our student average looks like the rest of Kaplan University, the BA will come in around $9,600 to $10,000 for the average person for a baccalaureate degree. No Title IV, didn't want to have anything to do with it because it would double our costs and double our liability. And I'd rather figure out other ways to help people get where they want to go. Enough said.
Okay, so we've heard a few models today about sort of people who are trying to sort of personalize and individualize the educational experience. One thing I'm wondering is from the traditional university side and even in the outside the university side, what's missing in the infrastructure? Why doesn't this just seamlessly happen? What do we, if you could like wave your magic wand right now and say, we still need this kind of a structure or this kind of a policy to make this more seamless, or maybe, or is it a business attitude? Is it something in society?
Well, the one thing that's changed, and I'll try to be uncharacteristically brief, the one thing that's changed is that the academy doesn't control the disruptive drivers. Up until 5 years ago, the academy controlled through governance and everything else, because abundant information has blown away institutions based on scarcity. So scarce information, create a lab. Oh, by the way, you're creating scarcity of attendance as well, because there's only so much room at the end. I don't know, I'm not sure anybody knows right now what's missing because there's so much new. We have to, I want to be free to play in the sand a little bit longer, but the thing that is different forever this time is that the academy doesn't control the disruptive forces.
I think one thing that struck me, we wrote a story about this in the Chronicle, and to be honest, sometimes when we write stories that involve Kaplan in it, our audience can be somewhat suspicious of ventures that come from Kaplan. The comments were surprisingly supportive of this idea. I thought, I don't know if you went back and looked.
Oh my God, I have to go back and rethink it.
I mean, at least the Chronicle, a lot of people in the Chronicle readership looked at that and said, you know, this is a good idea, you know, it's still unformed, but we like the approach. Anyone else? Do you have a thought about what's missing in the infrastructure right now? To make
I don't really have the feeling there's so much missing in the infrastructure than that we're in this really radical transitional period. And everybody kind of tries to figure out exactly what does it mean to the individual institution. And the answer might be very, very different for a Stanford who has a very, very high level brand and very, very rigid admissions, than the answer for, let's say, a community college who really desperately trying to bring people up to the level where they actually can succeed in a 4-year college or 2-year college program. And so we have an enormous amount of tools out there, and what we are trying very, very hard is not to tell institutions what to do and what not to do, but we're trying to tell what we try to do is build tools that they can experiment with, that they can try, create your own content, figure out what works, figure out what doesn't work, try to create assessments, try to create ways in how you get feedback loops back and so on. And so the answers really can't come, at least from my perspective, from the edtech industry. The edtech industry can build tools just like the next novel can't come from the people who build word processors. The answers has to come from the people who have been teaching, from the professors, from the teachers, and at the end, the teaching institutions.
Maybe I shouldn't have used the word infrastructure. I don't mean just in EdTech. I guess.
No,
because I'm wondering if, you know, looking broader into the zeitgeist, are there some things that need to happen more broadly to make some of this stuff sort of
I'm
propel?
sorry, I do have more of a kind of technical answer on one end, which is that I think the CIOs and the people who run big institutions have had a real difficulty in that they have big systems that are not extensible, and they don't lend themselves to getting best-in-class different kinds of tools all to work together, and it's really challenging. And I feel for them, and you know, I was talking to a school that has 75 different vendors, and it's like, that's ridiculous. But they're not, I mean, we do good LTI integrations, but there's a challenge there, and I think it limits the ability, like I said, to have best in class and to have the kind of modularity that I think really people need in order to be agile and serve the needs of their constituents within the institution. I think on the cultural side also, I think that faculty have never been asked or had their performance assessed based on their ability to teach. And I see increasingly the pressure for faculty around student evaluations at the end of the class. And I think that's a big shift for them, and it's uncomfortable.
I agree. I think there's this integration and implementation issue. And I was at a Gates Foundation meeting with Ulrich Christensen, who is one of the founders of the LearnSmart products that we developed. And a guy from Western Governors was sitting there, and the CIO from Cal Berkeley. And he was talking about implementing this on the campus, and the Western Governors guy said, we'll just tell our faculty what to do. And the Berkeley guy said, I can't tell our faculty anything. And so I think you have a combination of this. So you have faculty members who are sitting here and they're getting pressure from students. They're getting pressure from administration. You have funding coming this way. A lot of people are talking about you're going to get your funding if your students have better results. So there's all these different pressures happening, and then a lot of different things in here. We had a chart that showed all the people playing in this higher ed field right now. Thousands and thousands and thousands of companies, and the transparency and the information is not great, and then there's funding issues and everything else. And so we're sort of at this place now where it's going to sort out for a while, but a combination of...
Each of you, though, sells specifically to faculty, though. You and Gregor, right?
We sell at the institutional level.
You sell at the institutional level, but McGraw-Hill sells to faculty,
and
Versal sells to faculty.
Actually, our main focus is teachers and professors. We really believe that because of the issues of integration, because of the issues with actually getting technology adopted, we have a much, much better outcome if we can have individual teachers and professors use our product and be successful on an individual basis and then do the rollout. If you start out with a rollout, it's a bloody nightmare.
And so do they feel this urgency to use these products?
Oh yeah, teachers definitely feel the urgency because teachers, particularly on the high school level, but also on the college level, feel that they are disconnected from their students. They are just not communicating on the same language anymore that they are. I mean, when we grew up, the language was, well, we read books and we were in whiteboards. Now, the teachers are still with books and whiteboards, while the students are on iPhone and games and all of that stuff.
I wanted to jump in.
Then we'll bring the audience.
I'm not sure. My sense as a teacher is not so much that there are things that are missing. It's quite the opposite. There are so many things to choose from. It becomes overwhelming. And earlier this morning, people were talking about there's no one silver bullet. I completely agree, but at the same time, I think that schools and teachers should have an arsenal of many silver bullets, and some work for some people and some work for others. It's not popular to say at these conferences, but a lot of students like lecture. And there are a lot of excellent lecturers out there that students will only take that course, and when they take another type of course, they're like, I just want to lecture. And so we need to keep that in place for those students. That's a silver bullet for them. Other students can't stand a lecture and they're on their phone the entire time. So we need to have a different option for those students. And I think what we need to do is maintain a palette of options for students rather than trying to find the one thing that's going to work for everybody, because it doesn't exist.
And you have the bandwidth to do that?
Well, we still keep lecture courses, and then we have our lab for the Alex courses.
I mean, I guess as a teacher, do you have the bandwidth to do that?
Yes.
Are there some questions in the audience?
Peter, were you going to say something onto that?
I was just going to say that you can use the same data, and you can have a flipped classroom, a lecture classroom, a low residency program, a self-directed program, as long as you have consistency in the data, validity in the and rigor in the assessment. So it isn't up to the individual teacher, it's up to the organization to understand which student or find out quickly is going to like which way, which modality, and then you can give them essentially different participation models to the same information. That flips it again. That's personalization and adaptation.
Well, then, and a level of sophistication for the instructor, I think, that doesn't exist right now when you're just doing your lecture class.
Maybe different instructors in each case.
Yeah. There's some question up front. Oh, wait, there's one in the back.
Yeah, my name is Sean Nason. I'm from Xavier University, and I'm actually the Chief Innovation Officer for the university. And I guess one of the struggles that I struggle with as I'm sitting here with our Chief Technology Officer was a comment made a couple minutes ago around that many of you guys focus on selling just directly to faculty, and then you were talking about these enterprises that have 70 solutions that they have to serve from a chief technology officer standpoint. So how are we going to solve this paradigm in moving education, higher education forward? I liken it no different than healthcare right now. We're in as big of a mess as they are when we've got companies selling directly to the professor, and then you've got CIOs and chief technology officers trying to move in emerging technologies forward. When this is happening behind, until we find some common ground there, this battle's going to continue to happen. So I'd just like some insight from someone up there of what your opinion is.
My take is that model has to change. And when you ask the question, we have enterprise people that talk to CIOs, to talk to everybody else. But it's newer for us, but it does make sense. There are instructors that want that particular content for their course. But the decisions about what type of platform, how does this integrate, are you going to use this LMS, this other LMS, all of that has to be informed together. Otherwise, you end up, and as a CIO, you may not be able to implement what some of the faculty want for their individual courses. So it has to be involved in it. And right now, for us, it's kind of going both ways.
I would agree with that. I would say that, you know, I've been to universities where they have more than one LMS just in one institution, and it doesn't make any sense when you're trying to achieve institution-wide information and knowledge about your students and have apples to compare, and as you said, you know, maintain and train on different systems. It just doesn't make sense. I do think that with good API and continued evolution with LTI and other capabilities, that there should be better systems that really are more modular and really do allow for better kinds of integrations. You still have to go, I think, organically, even when we sell at an institutional level to the CIO and maybe the Vice Provost of Academic Affairs. We'll launch oftentimes a pilot in one particular program, even in one course or two, to kind of run through the whole, you know, from top to bottom, the whole process. And you learn from that process before you roll it out institution-wide. But you guys have to be able to vet and make some decisions about what's good for your students. And there's just no other way. I don't see any other way.
Any other question?
I think there was one up front here, Carrie, if you do a little race.
Look at this.
Who had the question? Okay.
Running.
We'll put you on the treadmill later inside that room.
Thanks. I have the image that a real change can be achieved if we change the conception of assessment, of what's learning and what tools and what, but I think that the system and the institutions are not ready to accept changes. So they might accept new technologies that allows us to get better scores in the standardized or the standard. So do you think that we can change the final view of what's a good assessment? And I think that technology can make a big change in assessment, but I don't think that we have achieved that change already. So we have a personalized, we have e-portfolios, but I think that we can dream of a different kinds of assessment. And so I would like if you could share what are your dreams of what we could have in 5 years if we could make it.
I think it's a great question because we don't really even have a common language on what we're talking about success or achievement, right?
Right. I think, you know, the traditional, what an institution thinks of as assessment at the institutional level, the accreditation level, reports, et cetera, we know that. We know how they assess students around GPA and those sorts of things, and there are tremendous limitations. I think that there's so much that is kind of just left to be untapped. So, for example, with portfolios, because that's what I live and breathe, students reflect upon the meaning of every assignment, every artifact they put in a portfolio. If you just listen to what they tell you about the meaning of learning, that is so much deeper. You get such better insights into what they're really learning than you see or get from an LMS with grades and other kinds of numerical data just pumped out. And so there's a whole level of really rich data that we're not even looking at or listening to. And in fact, not only could the institutions and instructors real time know much more about their learners, but the learners could learn more about themselves by having that information interpreted and fed back to them. I could have so many subconscious achievements become conscious, or track my own growth and development or lack thereof if something were fed back to me. There is just, I mean, I could talk about it for 800 days. There's just so much to be done that we're not doing. But I am optimistic that there's going to be change. I think it's going to be employers and the demands of our economy that are going to push change, because already every student I talk to, every college student, is so desperate to understand, what do employers need to see today? How do I differentiate myself? How can I be ready for a career? And they're really left disappointed oftentimes in the institution. And they're learning all over the place. They're learning online and in their jobs and in their communities, not just in a classroom.
Peter,
so we've got to deal with that.
How involved have employers been in what you've been doing over there?
We've been talking with employers and also people like Bob Jones and Tony Carnevale to try to understand and anticipate. So we'll be assessing through learning projects and guided independent study, leadership, diversity, teamwork, critical thinking, so that when we curate a profile for somebody, there will be evidence that they've created, not that they know something about leadership, but what they've done as a leader. I would say that institutions that don't get with this over time, except the ones that are living on another planet, are going to fail, because I've come to understand assessment as a pedagogy. And reflection is the process by which you extract meaning from your experience, whether it's academic experience, a professional experience, or a personal experience. When you learn how to do that, to differentiate how you've changed from what you did, you've become a lifelong learner.
Right.
And nobody can take it away from you.
Ever.
So I see it as a pedagogy now, and we're trying to build that pedagogy in.
And in the real world, do I have time to read what you reflected on and what you've self-assessed and all that? That's my question.
You can curate portfolios that can be reviewed in 5 minutes.
Sure.
And I can
it's
look
not,
at,
it's not only that, the price you pay for bad hire is way, way, way harder than investing extra. It might be at the end stage of the process, of the hiring process, not at the beginning.
It's not going to be the first screen,
yeah.
but once you get past your screen, you're going to
get...
There's
one other thing that actually he kind of reflected on that's really interesting is we haven't talked at all about motivation. I mean, we assume that everybody is incredibly motivated and everybody kind of has this drive to succeed and so on. And there was absolutely... That's just not the world. And one of the biggest risks that we have, particularly in switching into online learning or blended learning models also, is that the motivation that was previously provided by an incredible teacher who took you by the side and says, hey, listen, you've got to do this, you've got to finish this up, then you have these and these opportunities, that part gets lost. That's why the MOOCs have this incredible, crazy dropout rates. And so one of the things that we as an industry are challenged is to find ways of motivating students and including these great teachers into that blend of a learning experience, and not just say, hey, listen, you go off there and do your online thing.
I think that was a great question. And my answer would be, if we don't change, if you don't change, somebody else will be doing it for us. The results matter. And if we're not generating results, we don't really have a place here any longer. If your institutions aren't giving results as well as other places, students will go there.
Great. I think that's about all the time we have. Please join me in thanking Anne, Heather, Kurt, Peter, and Gregor.
Thank you. Thank you, Goldie. Thank you.